this false order. The world ruling powers could not stand this. So they knew, they were aware that this thought means that it could be spread out across the world, and it did happen. I mean, this idea and this opinion got around the world and draw attention of some people. So, and I will also elaborate on the attractions of this move. Well, the U.S., the former Soviet Union, the NATO member states that are following the U.S., or the Warsaw Pact member states, they were following the footsteps of the Soviet Union. Now, all those countries were awaiting a chance. They sought an opportunity. And Saddam Hussein of Iraq caused that opportunity. He was an ambitious person, a greedy, cheeky person, a despot, an inconsiderate person. It was just close to Iran, so they encouraged him, and he attacked Iran. Well, there are some people who blame the Islamic establishment. I mean, I'm talking about people inside the country. They blame us why the Islamic Republic is not at peace with the world, doesn't want to have relations. That's not true. If they mean that we do not have interaction with the world, we don't have, well, it's evident that this is not true. Today we are working with countries, you know, I can say it constitutes almost half the population of the world. We have diplomatic shuttles, we have trade relations. So this is only a ballyhoo that you see, that Iran has turned its back on other countries. That's not the case. This is not true. If they mean that it's the political order of the domineering system, well, that's true. We're against this. Just like the first day after the victory of the Islamic Revolution, we are against domineering. We're against the U.S. domination. There is no more Soviet Union. But America is at the forefront of Western countries. And you see the results of what they have done, the wars that they have caused, the discrimination, the tyranny. People who are under pressure, we're against this. And we have expressed this clearly. So that's the situation. Those days, it still persists these days. That day there was the incentive to attack Iranian borders, and today, thanks to the resilience of the Iranian people, and thanks to the strong presence of the Iranian people on different stages, they don't dare invade our borders. So in a different way, they are actually acting antagonistically against Iran. Of course, when I say that nobody stood against the order, global order of those days, we had an online movement that was there before the Islamic Revolution. We also joined the non-aligned movement in the early days of the Islamic Revolution. It was approximately 100 plus countries membrane the non-aligned movement, NAM. A large number of heads of the state of those countries were under the thumb of the U.S., some of them under the thumb of the Soviet Union in those days. Some of them were influenced and some of them took their orders out of fear. Well, they were scared. You know, they were intimidated by the savagery of those big powers. I mean, there was this president in one of the non-aligned movements. He told me, he was a president somewhere, and he told me, after I made a speech at the non-aligned movement, he came to me and said, everybody's afraid of the U.S. except you. And then he came to me and whispered, I'm afraid of the U.S. too. Well, they weren't scared. Therefore, the voice that uttered loudly and clearly and stood up against the wrong world order, it was the voice of the Islamic Revolution in Iran, with Iran being the hub. And we stood against that. And they were against us in those days, and there still are. So we should truly understand this. Some people have a problem realizing this. It's not the issue of nuclear energy, human rights, women's rights. These are only pretexts. It's the issue of saying something new, making a new statement regarding the wrong and discriminatory global order spread out across the planet. That's the issue. That's what they are at odds with. And this will not be addressed as long as the Islamic Republic of Iran and the Iranian people do not accept their coercion. And people won't accept this. Now, as for attractions of the Islamic Republic, you know, there were scared. There are two kinds of attractions, and they still persist in the Islamic Republic, and we need to preserve this. It draws in the people to itself. One of them is a political attraction, and the other one, a spiritual one. Now, the political attraction was the very resistance against the wrong and erroneous global order. That was the political attraction. Now, unlike governments and powers, world people were inclined to this political stance. The fact that they feel that there is a establishment in the world that has stood against this bullying and the wrong global order, that stands against the bullying of the world powers, this is what is attractive to those people. You see that our presidents, wherever in the Islamic community they've traveled to, the people are out there and welcome them. They show their interest. And that's the reason. There are a lot to say regarding this. So this is the political attraction. And as for the spiritual one, the faithfulness, the strong belief that people have in the religion, this is also highly attractive. In this spiritual, in this material world these days, the youth in, let's say, so-called advanced countries, civilized countries, as they call it, they feel hollow inside. This is what scientists and their own thinkers utter. They feel hollowness. They feel everything is in vain. Every day you see more and more suicides. So when you believe in a faith, you feel that you're sheltered, that it's heartwarming. That's what believing in a faith brings you. That's its idiosyncrasy. So that's also an attractive point regarding the Islamic establishment. So the reason for actually the military invasion against Iranian borders, that's actually led to the 8-year defense. It's for the same reason. So it was the attractions of the Islamic establishment that put fears in their hearts. It was the novel words and ideas of the Islamic Republic that put them to trouble, and they felt agitated. That's why they waged a war. And for 8 years, that invasion lasted. So that was the first point. Of course, there's a lot more that could be said. Thinkers, men of letters, writers have a lot to write about and to say about this issue. They can simply shed light on this and elaborate it further. As for the second point, that's a report on war and what happened during the war. Well, there are two versions of war that you can report. Now, there is one that I call a descriptive report. There's one kind of reporting in which, it's actually how the war started and how it went on and what it led to, what was the situation of either side at that time. So that's one kind of descriptive reporting in which you describe what happened during the war. Now, there is another report that I believe is more important, and that's the elaborative one. Well, that kind of reporting tells you about the spirit and the inner workings of the war. It sheds light on those aspects. I mean, our youth these days need to be informed about both aspects, and we need to work on that. I'm just mentioning highlighting the main points. Well, some good work has been done, and that needs to go on. Now, as for the descriptive report of war, there is this invading military at that time that attacked Iranian borders. On one side, we had the aggressive force. They were armed to the teeth. They already had a plan. No, they already planned for this before the invasion. Now, unlike us, we came under the attack without knowing. We had no plan, and that was, don't forget it, in the early days of the Islamic Revolution. So they had a plan already. So they had full military gear, hardware, they were well organized, they had a plan already in place. All the logistical support were in place. There is engineering, strong engineering, structure, robust connections, advanced weaponry at their disposal. They had the best of the tanks and fighter jets. The Saddam army was in possession of all of them, and they had colossal amounts of money and funds. Billions of dollars of funds. Well, they provided them with the funds. You know who did that. You're aware of this. So the U.S., the Soviet Union, Europe, they gave Saddam full support. Whatever he needed, they gave him. I mean, any old equipment, they were replaced. The French government gave the best of their fighter jets to Saddam Hussein. The German government provided Saddam with the chemical warfare needed. The U.S. administration constantly gave them intelligence regarding the battlefront. The neighboring countries also gave them funds and other logistical support. The littoral states of the Persian Gulf, you would see 18-wheelers, trucks loaded with all logistics and weapons to heading for Iraq. So that was one side, the invaders' side. That was the situation. Now, in a report I read somewhere that the number of the jet fighters that Saddam had after the war was a larger number than the fighter jets he had at the beginning of the war. See, despite all those fighter jets that we downed, still the number of fighter jets Iraq had was larger than the number it had before they started the war. So you see the extent of the support given to Saddam in those days. So that was the situation of the invader side. Now, as for the country that came under attack, that means us. Now, this is the situation like. We didn't have enough logistical support. We didn't have much at our disposal. We could not replace our equipment if needed. At the beginning of the war, there was a number of tanks of the Army's Division 92. They looted some of them, and nothing replaced them. I went to the city of Ahvaz. There was a division of 92 of the Army. They had 15 or 16 tanks, but they should have had 50 or 60 tanks. So we had nothing to replace with. Whatever we lost, it was just gone. No replacement for that. Now, our military forces, we had the army at one side, and they were under pressure from war. Rank and top brass of the army, they did not exactly know what they had at disposal. Martyr Fallahi, Zahir Najat, they were military top brass those days, so they were not very well informed about their own resources. And the reason was that before the Islamic Revolution, they were not in the high positions, but now they were at the top of the army. The IRGC was not very well organized at the early days of the war, so the IRGC was not what it is now. There were a number of battalions, 200, 300 strong battalions only within the IRGC in a limited way with very limited possibilities. At times, even they did not have their own individual arms. We had witnessed this, that they did not have their own individual arms. So that was the situation of the side that came under attack. Now, what result could you expect? On the basis of regular material world criteria, so the result should be that the other side, as it was anticipated, within a week or a couple of weeks, they should have crossed into Khuzestan province of Iran, to go to the heart of Iran and head for the capital, Tehran. But that did not happen. The very same force that I told you about, the situation I told you about, not very well equipped, in the early days of the war, that we showed our victories, that we dealt heavy and deadly blows on that very well-equipped and advanced army that was very well funded, and they benefited from all kinds of support. And finally, after 8 years in humiliation, that army was pushed out of the Iranian border. This is the description report of the 8-year war in a nutshell. Now, the main factor for this victory, now, what that was, and not this is what you know very well. It was morale, it was strong faith, the struggle, and so on and so forth. Now, as for the second version of the report that I said has an elaborative in nature, this outweighs the first report. Now, in this kind of reporting, we say that this war was not solely for the sake of defending the nation. Of course, that's a virtue, that's a value, no doubt about it. But that was not the only issue. It went beyond this. It was defending Islam. It was actually following what the Holy Quran had told us. So the war was on a path that in the religious teachings we call the struggle or jihad for the cause of God. So holy sacred defense in Iran was actually a struggle or jihad on the path of God. So the sacred defense kept the revolution alive. It kept Islam alive. It made the Iranian people dearer. It brought them further respect. The spiritual atmosphere was spread across the nation, and the true essence of humanity and belief was revived among our youth, our youngsters who went to the battlefronts. From an individual, regular individual, they turned into somebody connected to Almighty God. The men who set foot in the war fronts, they turned into a great Islamic scholar with a lot of spirituality. Our late leader of the Islamic Revolution was a great man, a noble man, addressing a large number of great people. He said that for 70 years he have had supplication and prayers. It may, hopefully God would accept it, but you should also read what our martyrs have written in their wills. I mean, the youth that they went to the war, they took part, and they embarked on a struggle. They put their lives on the line for the path of God, and they took action. That means the 70-year of that scholar who prayed all of his life. It's tantamount to that 70-year of that theologian or man of God. That's equal. So this is the essence and the nature of the war. So they were targeting Islam. So the whole battlefront was kind of like a place for prayer. And you could see all kinds of people that helped and contributed in a way to turn the battlefront into a prayer house. We had army officers that I myself witnessed. I was visiting at midnight the Battlefront. I saw, I don't remember, he was a non-commissioned officer. He was there beside the tank, and he was saying his prayers. You could see an army officer praying in the heart of the night, deep of the night. So that, when you see that army officer standing near his tank battalion, and then you have this huge, for instance, prayer ceremonies within their headquarters, and anywhere on the battlefront they were present. You could see them both. You could see an army officer that begged to be sent to join the jihadi groups of Martyr Chamran, for instance, his teams. Well, we're just in Ahvaz. It was the early days of the war, and one night there was an officer, a colonel, I believe, or maybe a major. He came to me, and he said, "I have a request to make." First I thought he was going to ask maybe he has something and he needs a few days off. That's what I thought in the first place, that he was going to ask for. But he told me that when Martyr Chamran, they were going to, in their own words, they hunted tanks during the night, and he wanted permission to join that tank hunting team of Martyr Chamran. He was begging for this, to be given permission. He was a man of maybe in his mid to late 40s or early 50s. He wanted to join the youth fighting alongside Chamran, to go and take the RPG and hit tanks. So you had these people there, and then you had teenagers who manipulated their date of birth, or they begged their parents to let him go, to give him permission to join our youths in the battlefront. This is what we witnessed. We had those special prayers, we had all those shedding of tears in the middle of the night, and all the services that were offered without expecting anything. The commander that would go in the middle of the night, and he would polish the combatants' shoes, he would wash their clothes. That's you can never see such scenes in any battlefront, inside any military, anywhere in the world. This solely belongs to the Islamic Republic of Iran. The last moments of their life, they do not drink water. They let his comrade, who is losing his life, to drink a sip of water. And then he himself achieves martyrdom without drinking any water, a drop of water. This is what we have seen. This is what we have seen at close quarters. We have heard that people have seen this. Their experiences under the heavy shelling of the enemy. The young man writes in his will, and he recommends our women to observe the Islamic dress code, the hijab. This means spirituality. That means strong belief in and following the Islamic teachings at that level. So in my opinion, this kind of reporting of the war and this aspect of the war outweighs that descriptive reporting. This is where Almighty God shows His power in the victory achieved by His noble and servants. This is where God shows that this is divine will, as it is promised. That the true believers and pious servants of God receive divine support. Of course, they have hard days, they suffer, and the 8-year sacred defense, Iranians went through a lot. Families, parents, couples, they went through a lot. But the Almighty God gave them dignity, victory. So these are two kinds of reporting, and both of them need to go down in history. They need to be reported. There are some people who have heard these, who have seen this. They need to reflect them and express them, and some others should also turn them into attractive products. Of course, it's been done partly. Last year I said that we need to do 100 times as much as we have done already. That's what we need to do. But we have not done enough. During the war, if we had enough possibilities, we could have done much more achievements. We had limited possibilities for promotion and propaganda, but the enemy had unlimited possibilities, and we need to expand on this same thing these days too. So those are the issues related to the Defense Week. Now, today, the same thing is happening, similar thing is happening in Lebanon and Palestine. The issues of Palestine and Lebanon are similar to what happened during the 8-year war imposed on Iran. This is again a struggle on jihad on the path of God. There's an Islamic country, a Muslim country like Palestine. The most treacherous and wicked infidels of the world has occupied that land, so it's incumbent on everyone to try and to help this to return. Palestine should be returned to Muslims, to the original and real owners. The Al-Aqsa Mosque should be returned. Slogans of death to Israel. So it's a actual divine move that's taken place here. The people of Palestine, people in Gaza, they're struggling par excellence. Actually, they are treading on the path of God, and jihad on the path of God. And those who contribute to help them, they're also involved in the jihad. The Hezbollah in Lebanon that stood in support of Gaza, and they are now being exposed to these bitter incidents. They are also involved in the jihad for the path of God. So in this battle, the atheist and the wicked adversary has in its position the most advanced weaponry. The U.S. is standing behind them and supporting them. The Americans say that we have nothing to do in this, we're not informed. They're lying. That's not true. They are both informed. They are intervening. And they need the victory of the Zionist regime. The very same administration now at the helm at the U.S. For the elections that they have around the corner, they require this. They need to show and to prove that they have supported the Zionist regime and they have helped them achieve victory. Of course, with the vote, they also need the votes of American Muslims. So that's why they're making believe that they have nothing to do with this, but they are involved in this. Money, arms, logistical support, propaganda, that's what the enemy enjoys. But the other side, we had true believers, and they don't have even 1/10 of those possibilities in their position. At the same time, the one that emerges victorious is the one who is struggling on the path of God. It's the Palestinian resistance that will emerge victorious. Hezbollah will achieve victory. Well, to date, the victory has belonged to Hezbollah and resistance fighters so far. And the reason? The massacre of the people. If the wicked Zionist regime had been able to defeat the resistance fighters, be it in Gaza, or in the West Bank, or in Lebanon, if they had been able to defeat the resistance fighters in those areas, they wouldn't have needed to portray its wicked face in the world and commit all those crimes against homes, hospitals, schools, women, and children. They have not been able to, because they have failed to overcome the resistance fighters. So they have no other option. I mean, they have to pretend that they have the upper hand by targeting women, defenseless people, the cars moving on the road, the hospitals and schools. So the enemy has been defeated so far. Well, yes, they deal blows. Some of the effective elements of Hezbollah, they have killed them, they have achieved martyrdom. There's been a loss for Hezbollah, definitely. But not such a loss that would bring Hezbollah to its knees. Hezbollah is well structured, it's much more robust than this. I mean, they are powerful. They're so powerful, they cannot be, actually, they cannot receive a lethal blow. I mean, such things cannot translate into lethal blows. Well, yes, it's a loss when you lose a commander who has been fighting for a long time. Of course it's a loss, no doubt about it. So to date, so far they have been victorious, and hopefully with the blessing of God, ultimate victory will also belong to the resistance front and to Hezbollah. Slogan of Death to America. So, the last point I'm going to make in my speech today well, our combatants, our fighters, in order not to see the enemy flags at our borders, they have given their lives. They have embarked on self-sacrifice. The resistance fighters and combatants, their families mourned for them just because they didn't want the enemy flag and banners be hoisted along the Iranian borders. The Iranian people cannot accept those flags to be raised by those who've infiltrated, who've penetrated into the country. They cannot let them do the same thing in our country. Slogan of "We'll never accept humiliation." So the flag of cultural encroachment, that has to do with the lifestyle of the adversaries and the antagonistic inculcations and infatuation by the enemy. That flag should not be hoisted within our country. We need to be cautious. All of us are responsible. At the Ministry of Education, they need to be careful. In our radio and TV organization, IRIB, we need to be cautious. Also in our printed press, in the Ministry of Higher Education, Ministry of Health. These are the places where you are training our youth and educating our youth. You got to be cautious. That's where the enemy was defeated by our combatants and fighters, so we should not allow the defeated enemy to do what they want to do inside our country using different ploys, tricks, and schemes to achieve their goals. Hopefully the Almighty God will help all those people, our officials, our authorities, our men and women, activists in different sectors of Iran. Hopefully God Almighty will make us vigilant and help us stand against the enemy plots. And that's the end of the speech.
Well, what you just watched was the leader of Iran's Islamic Revolution, Ayatollah Seyyed Ali Khamenei,